Hey y'all, I'm creating this video as I promised in class so I can explain a little bit more about the assigned activity that we had today. So this assigned activity, basically you were divided into 7 different groups and then each group received a specific patient case. So what you're going to have to do is the 3 of you need to get together and then come up with at least 2 exercises. And then when I say exercises, that actually includes the stretching as well. So passive stretch, dynamic stretch, PNF stretch, that would actually be included as 2 exercises, but at least 2 exercises for each phase. And then for phase, and then I intentionally vaguely define the acute and subacute and chronic phases. Okay, so you need to come up at least with 6 different exercises because you have 3 phases in total. You can use the manual therapy technique that we have went over in class today, but since this is not the main focus of this rehab class, the number of the manual therapy that you can use for each phase is limited to 1. Okay, so you have to have at least 1 exercise per phase, if that makes sense. And we need to get back together in class on Thursday, and then we're going to discuss. We're going to go over each case in class, and then we're going to have a little bit of live discussion of what we're gonna do in each phase and in each patient. So what I'm gonna ask you to do is just be ready to discuss your case and then be ready to maybe show it to us, explain it to us, and maybe demo. Okay, and I'm going to give you some example. Let's say this is maybe my case. For example, I have this 21-year-old male football player who sustained a slap lesion. He had a surgery. He was on this shoulder sling for 7 days now and is now basically stuck in this internally rotated position for that amount of time. So what I'm going to have to do is I have to think about how can I initiate the range of motion exercise for him, and then maybe subacutely how I can continue to improve, and towards the end how can I achieve the full range of motion for him. Okay? And I just added this specific timeline because maybe I wasn't too sure about what the slap lesion is and what the typical protocol is after that. So I did a little research on this, and I found out that at each phase there are very specific limitations to that. And I actually expect you to do that for your case too. If you're not too sure about what the ACL reconstruction surgery is and what the typical restrictions are, I actually want you to look that up. Okay, so take your time and look it up. That's what the whole assignment is designed for. I want you to look through the resources to see what you can find. Okay, so when it comes to slap region surgery, what they did was they just went in and kind of scoped it and cleaned up the wound. But what I have to be very careful is I cannot load the biceps for this patient. Okay, during the first say 2 to 3 weeks, because if I'm going to load that biceps, it's going to be too early. I can potentially make the region worse. And initially, the first, again, 2 to 3 weeks, abduction is typically limited to about 60 degrees, and then no external rotation is allowed. Okay, so in addition to some of the things that I have to consider, I have to think about this particular protocol that I'm going to get from the physician. And during the subacute phase, I know that the ER is still going to be limited to about 40 degrees in the neutral position. I'm not allowed to bring him to a 90 degrees of abducted position and do external rotation just yet. Okay, so be aware of some of the typical protocol that you might have to go with. Okay, so take your time and look up your injury first, so you have a nice understanding of what the injury or surgery is about, and then how typical healing and protocol should be looking like. Okay, before you start to think about some of the range of motion exercises. But moving on, maybe if I am exploring some of the possibilities for acute phase, this individual was in a sling for 7 days, so I'm pretty sure everything is pretty stiff, and I have to go really easy at the beginning. What I'm going to do first is maybe I'll try pendulum exercises for shoulder. So what I can do is I can ask my patient to use a table to support themselves and use the entire body. As you can see in this, the lady is shifting her body weight back and forth using the legs and the trunk. Okay, and the shoulder right there is just all relaxed, and she's just letting it swing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now we can do side to side. Okay, I have to be a little bit careful with the degree because I know this patient is very sensitive at this point, and the range of motion is very limited. So what I can do is, again, give him a table and then ask him to do side to side, front and back range of motion. That's known as pendulum exercises. Okay, if that exercise is too easy for him and then he started to say regain some more range of motion, what I can do to make it a little bit harder, okay, what I can do to progress is maybe I can start to do a little bigger motion or start to add some planes. If the single plane side to side or front and back is easy for him, I'm going to start to do some circles, clockwise and counterclockwise, Okay, or maybe have him hold the weight in hands to load that joint a little bit. But again, I have to be really careful with this patient not to load the biceps, but maybe letting it swing that way. If this patient is feeling that, you know, maybe this exercise is a little bit too much for them, what I can do is just stay within the single plane or try to keep that motion very small so he can handle it. I'm just going to add some progress and a regress just to kind of inspire y'all. Some other things that I can maybe do at this phase is table slide exercises for shoulder. So I'm going to have him, okay, sitting on a chair, and table is right there for him, and then I have a towel right there on the table. So what I can ask him to do, and I actually cannot do this one in particular because this is external rotation and he's not allowed to do it at this phase yet. But look at this one, okay? So this patient is facing forward, and this is a table, and then here's the towel. What she's going to do is she's going to slide her hand on the table. It's a somewhat assisted, it's active and assisted exercises because, yeah, she's doing it actively, but table is right there to assist that motion. Okay, it's not like she's doing this against the gravity. Table is actually lifting her arm up a little bit for her. So I can try to attack a couple different range of motions here. Again, I need to be very careful with abduction, and the external rotation exercise is not allowed at this point, but I can attack everything else. If this exercise starts to become a little bit easy for my patient, I can maybe change the position of the patient to maybe move a little bit more against the gravity. Or I can progress to different type of active assisted range of motion exercises that would require more active effort. Regress, if this is too much for him, I can do a little less active motion. Maybe this kind of a flexion is too much for him at this point. I'll just keep it just a little bit more and then not pushing this far. Another way to regress is maybe instead of him actively moving his own shoulder this way, I can maybe not use his arm at all and maybe use the trunk and then use the lower body to step back. Okay, step back and lean. Okay, so now in this picture from here to here, what she's doing, just shifting the body weight back. Okay, and now starting on the back leg and leaning down so she can achieve more flexion. Is she using this arm at all? No. Okay, so I can make it more of a passive exercise if this active assisted is a little too much for him. One more thing, if I can suggest maybe some spinal cervical traction or positional release technique to reduce some spasm around the neck, maybe upper trap or levator scap, something like that. So I can consider performing those minor techniques there, or even a passive stretch of the shoulder. Okay, and I also have to think about some other joints as well, maybe elbow, maybe wrist, because yeah, he is stuck in that sling and he's not really moving his elbow neither. Okay, and I don't want him to develop any kind of stiffness over the elbow. His elbow is good, so if anything, I can at least work on his elbow range of motion. Okay, and then maybe a little bit of shoulder range of motion passively. Moving on to subacute phase, what I can do is the T-bar or I-bar exercises. Okay, so I can have him using the grabbing onto a T-bar or maybe I-bar like this one. Okay, with this arm he's going to initiate the motion by himself, but he's going to use the other hand as well as the bar to push him a little bit further away. Okay, so this is again another example of active assisted range of motion, but this one he can actually achieve a little bit more range of motion than just doing a table slide. Okay, again, changing the position, I can do some rotational forces, but again, I cannot still do this range. This is external rotation, that's a little too much for him. So I have to be very smart about actual direction that he's gonna go. Some other things that I can do, if T-bar is not quite available at, say, home or at the setting, I can always do the exact same thing with the towel. There are actually specific commercial products that's out there to facilitate this kind of stretch, even though I actually never tried it myself. I just wanted to show you some of the pictures that people actually create products for a lot of different things. Subacute phase, continuing on, maybe I can do the aquatics therapy. So maybe I can have my patient maybe just simply be immersed in deep water, so maybe neck down, or I can have him or him using the specific equipment that would add some buoyancy, okay, to his arm, so we can work on some shoulder range of motion. In this position, this position and that position probably very good for flexion. This one is more for, I want to say abduction, but it looks like a little bit of abduction and flexion at the same time. Soft tissue mobilization, if this patient happens to develop some adhesion, I can work on that by doing a manual therapy massage or maybe install assisted soft tissue mobilization such as Graston. So but continuing on, maybe I can even give him some home self-stretch program. So again, using like a wall or a table, I can instruct him to start to do a little bit more stretching at home. Okay, self-stretch, something like this. Again, depending on a joint range of motion that's available and appropriate at this phase, I can try to prescribe a little bit of a home stretching exercises. Chronic, if I can start to attack, helping him achieve full range of motion, what I can do is the wall climbing. So using the finger, use the finger to walk on the wall, go all the way, and work on the flexion range of motion. If you're facing a sideway, then you can work on abduction. Okay, try to achieve higher range. If this is not high enough, you can even step a little bit closer to the wall so you can achieve the full abduction if you're ready. Okay. Pulley exercise is also very common for shoulder. So I can use this kind of pulley system. Okay. And let's say I'm working on this shoulder. I'm going to use this shoulder actively to bring it up as far as I could. And I'm going to use this arm and this pulley system to push it and pull it a little bit higher to add a little extra motion. Okay. You can be very creative and work on some internal rotation if you want to, combine it with extension and adduction. Or you can also do abduction of the shoulder. Maybe a little bit different self-stretch program that he can be working on, especially if this patient is a baseball player. Modified sleeper stretch to stretch the posterior capsule, as well as working on a cross body stretch. Okay. If I need to work on a trigger point, I can try to do maybe active release technique. So finding the tender spot, keeping the pressure, and then ask him to move. So, just to kind of again sum everything up, what I discussed is something like this. And then I know that I gave way too many examples that you really need for this activity, but just so you would have an idea of what I'm going to be looking for. And I kind of divided everything you can find over this side is exercises or stretches that would count. Okay? And those are my kind of additional manual therapy techniques that I can also incorporate. So, if you were to bring something like this in class, and again, it don't have to be 5 for each phase, just 2, okay, at the minimum, and just be able to say demonstrate and explain what each exercise will do, and explain why those will be beneficial for the patient. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or come by during my office hours. Again, my office is located over at the Island Hall Athletic Training Center. So good luck and have fun with this activity. I'll see you on Thursday.